Hey guys, welcome to No More Bad Tech Talk. I'm your host, Doug, and today we're going to be talking about technologists in transportation and logistics. And we have our first inaugural guest, Taylor Cline. Taylor, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the world and a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sounds good. Thanks, Doug. I'm Taylor Cline. I've been working in freight logistics in the transportation space since 2014. Worked for a startup freight brokerage. Was my first gig in transportation. We grew that from three guys in an office that was $800 a month to a third office that has 70 plus freight brokers, $150 million in revenue. I've worked for an asset-based trucking company, primarily owner-operators, self-dispatch owner-operators. That's what I've done for the past 2 years. And for the past 2 years, I oversaw technology for both of those companies, the freight brokerage and the trucking company.
Yeah, and that's awesome. It's great that you went from startup to 150 million. Now, Taylor, as you know, we talk a lot about technology and what's going on in this space, both in the brokerage world and on the asset side. And so from your experience and in these last 10 years and what you've seen in the last couple of years, it's no secret the economy's taken a hit, right? And so just really understanding, how did technology play a role in that growth that you guys experienced? And where do you see it play a role today as the industry has taken a hit, and where do you want it to kind of where do you see it going from here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think good companies always seek out good tech for problems that they have or inefficiencies that they have. So you can overuse technology and it can get in your way. If you're not selective or responsible in how you're using technology, but well-selected technology that solves material problems, that create better efficiency, help your staff take on more that a computer cannot do. It's just a big deal, especially with the market being the way that it is. Any small gain, if you get lots of small gains in efficiency, over time, it's a lot. In aggregate, small gains are a big deal. So I think that's going to continue to be the case. I think there's going to continue to be an oversaturation of SaaS products and technology that don't solve enough problems. That's commonplace in transportation where, there's a good piece of tech, but it causes another issue or doesn't solve enough problems. So it's all about who you have driving the technology ship at your company. And if they've got their ear to the ground for their boots on the ground people, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And you said something that actually, I'm going to use a baseball reference. I know you're a big Braves fan. You mentioned that the small gains are something that really help you in the interim. I'm not in the interim, but in the long game. And so thinking about, I'm a Yankees fan. We're known as the Bronx Bombers. Unfortunately, what's plagued us is we can only hit home runs. We don't know how to, get on base. So, the Braves.
Yeah, it's because your right field's like 100 feet from the plate.
Yeah. So the Braves and the Astros found a way to win, and they did it with small ball, as they call it. And so really just, something that you mentioned is those small gains. And when you're looking at technology and you're looking at adopting it, I know there's there's mega SaaS companies out there. Like, we think of McCloud, right? McCloud is probably the biggest, oldest TMS in the market. And, you have smaller brokerages and, growing brokerages now where, they can go to a McCloud and pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but for trying to hit that home run. But is that the right approach, or how do you really vet technology so that you're not becoming inefficient using it, right? Where you're not going solely for the home run and then you end up striking out. Um, I guess, if you can
Yeah.
explain that a little bit, and what you guys did in that growth that you experienced.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. In my personal experience, we always had McCloud. So we were, the only reason we were able to afford that was because we were the sister arm of an already successful asset trucking company based out of West Tennessee. So we had McCloud. Of course, at that time, I knew nothing about alternative TMSs or anything like that. That would come years later. But what I would say is that there are cycles for any startup or emerging company. I don't think it would be wise for a startup with no business to go spend a few $100,000 on a TMS. That doesn't make good sense. I think sometimes in transportation, when you're a small, emerging, or growing company, asset or freight brokerage alike, you have to select the affordable bang, the most bang for your buck, even if you have to compromise on its capabilities, only because that's what's in the budget. That's not a decision forever. You can know day one that eventually you want to get into a McCloud system because you want it to be very robust. You want it to do X, Y, or Z. But I think it's really important for small and emerging companies, growing companies, to make a responsible decision, knowing that you are probably going to have to be very creative in piecemealing some tools together to get what you want at an affordable rate. That also means it's going to be more of a pain than what it should be. But as those revenue dollars, as the margin increases, your headcount increases, you have a more diverse book of business, then you can start looking towards realizing your initial goal of, the big TMS or the big software or a custom TMS, because you've earned the right to do that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of the industry heading towards owning their own software, which has been pretty interesting, given like what's going on in the economy today. Why do you think, from your experience and as an operator, why do you think that a lot of companies are now adopting their own technology, where as before, they were just mainly logistics companies, but now they're kind of arming themselves as tech companies? Do you see that as an advantage in the economy today, and the way that the economy is going to move in tomorrow, right after all is said and done, and the next generation brokerages and carriers are coming in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a nice hedge. I don't think that companies make an intentional decision to, hey, you know what, while we're running this freight brokerage or this trucking company, we'll develop our own TMS and then sell it to other people. And that'll be but it's, there have been several companies that have developed a piece of custom software in-house, and then they add, refine capabilities. And before too long, they recognize that, hey, what we have is, as good or better than several of these products that are on the market. So I guess it's really a two birds, one stone win, in my opinion, if you can afford it, is that with custom technology, you don't have to compromise, or at least you are less likely to have to compromise on what it is that you want, the functionality, the capabilities. And two, if you do a really good job, there's likely a big market of competitors that would love to pay you to gain that same benefit. If you build something that's really good, and then all of a sudden maybe you do decide, hey, maybe we're a tech company now, because that multiplier is a lot higher than a freight brokerage or a trucking company, right? That's when you get into the 8s and 10 times EBITDA. So, I think it's a good move for anybody that can afford it. But even if you can afford it, you have to really know what is useful and what isn't. And often that doesn't happen when you have a bunch of venture capitalist money coming in. There are some engineers that make some assumptions on what they think is pertinent to the transportation industry, and it just doesn't land well, even though it looks good.
Yeah, that's a good point. That kind of takes me back to what you said earlier, where you can end up picking the wrong technology, and something that we've been hearing a lot from customers and even people that we meet at conferences and trade shows is that you've got these platforms that exist, and they'll solve one problem really well, but the issue is that in solving that problem, you're not really solving anything else, and it ends up becoming sort of like a burden on your business, because you're now having to adapt the way that you run your business to this piece of technology. And and in all the questions and surveys that we've asked, on average, a brokerage is using about 14 pieces of software. And if you're having to adapt to 14 different things, then you end up creating some inefficiencies in your workflows, and you end up having to sort of be at the mercy of what your technology dictates that you can and can't do. um, is that sort of like what you were meaning when like you have to pick the right technology, or it can kind of like stop you or inhibit you in any way? um, just curious, like what your standpoint has been as being an operator and a procurer for your organization and managing your technology. Like how did you see that, and how did you guys manage that throughout your time?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, those small gains of efficiency can work against you in the exact other direction, right? Those small inefficiencies also add up, and that's what I call, a Band-Aid solution. So, um, and this happens really often in small, medium-sized freight brokerages and trucking companies that are growing. They're just trying to keep up with that growth, and often you'll find that there's not this huge bureaucratic fleet of executives and departments that are making these decisions on behalf of the organization, right? So often it'll be the person that's the guy that puts out fires day in, day out on the weekends. He's having to use his spare time, which is spare time, to research technology, take on vendor calls, to review technology that might add value to the organization. So what happens is they're having to select technology reactively. They don't have time. They're running so lean from an executive standpoint that they don't have time to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take the next 4 to 6 weeks, and I'm only going to focus on reviewing our tech stack and seeing how it compares to what's available in the market. See if we're overpaying, if we're missing out on something. So that's typically, I would say that's where most mid-cap brokerages are. I'm not saying they all operate that way. Some of them recognize it, and they set time aside, or they allocate a person to handle that. But what happens is you start picking technology that solves the problem in the moment, right? You might have a customer that requires a certain tracking platform or a certain cadence of tracking frequency. So they don't have the luxury of time to make the proper decision. So they'll go select the product at the most affordable rate that suits that need. And then the next time a problem presents itself, they're going to do the same thing. They're reactively selecting technology. And that's how you get into, hey, we're using 14, 15, 16 different products that are Band-Aid solutions in the moment for what we needed. You rinse and repeat that process over several years, and your entire operation is, it works, but it is highly inefficient, right? I mean, it's, you often will have tech products that are redundant to another tech product that you use. And then it starts poking holes in your SOPs for your people, right? You're going to have certain individuals that prefer one product over another. And then when you start looking at your data and data audit, you kind of have to point the finger back to yourself because, your tech stack is not bulletproof. And anytime you have people toggling back and forth between out of the TMS, ingesting data via webhook, and the list could go on and on. It can turn into a mess. It works, but it is reactive management. And I think that it would be interesting to see how much time their account managers or their reps or carrier sales, all of these boots on the ground type people that make organizations run. It'd be interesting to see how much time they lose in a day, a week, a month, just navigating between 3 screens, dragging, just trying to leverage these technologies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's curious. I've personally never been a broker, but I've been in, some of my customers' offices, and it's crazy to me that they have like 4 or 5 screens and they want more. And I'm like, man, I've got 2 and I barely just got 2. And it's
and
like
that's the reason. Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the reason. You go into any freight brokerage that has 3, 4, 5 monitors. I can point you to a brokerage that has a very inefficient tech stack because there's lots of dragging and clicking going on.
Man, that's crazy. So do you feel that there's too much technology, or is there not enough, or like where do you see the gap outside of like the reactivity of the way that executives are procuring? Like, I just see there's like, startups in technology like left and right. And I'm just like, man, like, that's crazy. I mean, it's interesting to see that, being in the space, see how many technology, providers are. So I'm curious to see, like, from your experience, like, is that too much, or is it not enough, or is it the wrong technology?
I think it's definitely an oversaturated market. So when you think about how rapidly the technology has changed in the logistics industry, the transportation industry, in 2014 and even early 2015, we were still exchanging carrier packets, setting up carriers with paper. So we would email them the setup packet, they would print it off, fill it out by hand, and then they'd fax it back to us. That's how we were onboarding carriers, right? And then we would be the certificate holder on the insurance. So, ideally we get notified if their insurance lapse or they've got a cancellation notice. And that was only 9 years ago. 10 years ago, that would have been a common occurrence. So you think about 10 years, how rapidly, how many SaaS products, pieces of technology have poached is the wrong word, because I think it's a good industry for tech to have shifted focus on. This is an industry that needed more technology. So, and they were there to give it, right? Like there's so many SaaS products. So I think there is enough technology. I do think that there are enough players in the game. There's enough interest. And I don't think there's too much, because it's just like any other market, right? I think the strongest tech companies are going to survive. The ones that don't solve enough problems, they're going to fall to the wayside. It's no different than supply and demand in the transportation industry. If you build a good product, people are going to adopt it, right? They're going to want to pay for it. These are good businesses to work with. Transportation and logistics company, they pay their bills. I'm going to do a ... typically, because these past few years have been a little crazy, but they're good business partners. I think that it's really just it's so competitive. The reason it's oversaturated with bad tech is because there's this big push from private equity companies, venture capitalist firms that are dumping money into emerging technology. They all want to be first to market, and if you're prioritizing being first to market to get your adoption rate up, well, of course. I mean, if you're rushing the deployment, then quality is not necessarily the top priority. So it's going to have bugs. It's not going to solve enough problems because they didn't want to do more R&D. You throw it out and you just say, hey, we'll give it out for free, and then our users are going to be the R&D, and then we're going to get all this feedback. And I think that rush to be on the market has really allowed and enabled some bad pieces of technology that maybe weren't a bad concept, but were not ready to be developed or to be deployed to enter the market. And although you can't find them everywhere because people will avoid them, they do exist at certain companies, and some of those companies are small trucking companies that are no more the wiser, right? Like they're leveraging bad tech that they don't know there's an alternative. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think those companies will, it's just like any other market. The strongest will survive. And in tech, the strongest can be directly correlated to good. If it does a good job, people will want to buy it. They will refer it to other trucking companies and freight brokerages. So we're just in the first initial rush of the tech space onto transportation, because there's lots of money moving. It makes good sense. And we got lots of problems. So that's perfect, right? We got lots of money and lots of problems. We're perfect for tech people to come try to take our money. Just make sure and build good products before you take it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or they have really good salespeople, maybe.
That's true.
Yeah.
Very true.
They'll take
ideally both, but it's not necessarily required to be both.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I was thinking about it as you were talking, and just kind of thinking about, like you mentioned that 9 to 10 year span, how everything has just boomed. Of course, when it comes to like the actual the market, there's been a significant hit over the last couple of years, and there's many reasons why people say that is. One of them being there's oversaturation in the market as far as like carrier capacity. So it's just a supply and demand problem. But there's also a lot of talk about, with the election coming up, with kind of that pendulum starting to swing back into like sort of a normalcy as, some of these organizations are closing down. Like, where do you see the market today, and where do you see it headed in the immediate and like long-term future? Like, do you really believe that in Q3, Q4, things are going to start turning around, or are you more in that like mindset that like the worst is yet to come and then things will get better? Just kind of curious, like, since you've been in the game for so long, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's your thought on that?
So I'm not big on predictions. Obviously, I stay close to some data that I think helps support where the market may be going. But as far as forecasting macroeconomics, into several months, several quarters into the future, it really, it's something that everyone, transportation or otherwise, should, try to keep a gauge on, but it doesn't really impact the way that I make decisions for businesses that I work for. And what I mean by that is I'm not running a $1 billion freight brokerage or a $1 billion asset trucking company. If I were, then, that it would behoove me to be very close to that predictive analysis. But, there's no market really that I've seen, even in the past 12 to 18 months, which have been very difficult. For carriers, it's been tough for, well over 2 years, but it's catching up to brokers where it's hurting them as well over the past 12 to 18 months. There's still plenty of opportunity for good freight brokers and good carriers to make money in the marketplace, and not just baseline money, paycheck to paycheck. You can make really good money. Now everybody wants a better market. Everybody wants a tighter market. Even, brokers want a tighter market. Brokers do not want the market to be this loose, even though capacity is cheap, because eventually if economy stays loose, the trucking market, the capacity is loose for long enough, what happens is, shippers become highly aware. As soon as capacity loosens, brokers do not pass that information along to their customers immediately, right? There's just a huge spread in margin percentage. And that goes on for a little while. Sometimes it's because contractually they have that business at a premium rate, but if they can buy capacity for cheaper, they're going to do that. So what happened initially in 22, whenever fuel went to the moon and freight volumes fell off the cliff, because people were getting out, they were no longer sitting at home ordering stuff on Amazon. Outside of my wife continued to order stuff on Amazon. She's really, really trying to prop up the trucking industry because she is a supporter and she believes in me. I love her very much. Anyways, yeah. Most people did not continue to spend money on Amazon. So they were getting out. So you had warehouses that were overstacked with volume of freight because that's what everybody was doing. There was so much consumer goods spending with everybody sitting at home that there were warehouses full of this stuff that was imported and everybody was buying, because that's how we entertained ourselves at the time during the shutdown. So that, in my opinion, is really what led to the initial problem. Everybody was stocked. Things did not have to move because consumer spending did not support it. And that was a big correction. It was a big party. I've always heard, and I believe this is true, you better make sure that the hangover or the party is worth the hangover that you're going to have, right? So smart companies recognize that, man, even everybody felt nervous. When it's really good for a long time, brokers are nervous and trucking companies are nervous because they are the only ones that continue in cycles, and whenever it stays up here for this long, it is frightening for everyone. Everybody wants it to come down just a little bit because we want a small correction so we can continue to make pretty good money. But if everybody's making insane money, there's only one way for it to go, and it's drastic. I believe the indicators point to it being at the bottom, or we've already experienced the bottom and we're starting to move upward. I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm not going to make a prediction, but I don't think that the conditions are going to go in a negative direction. I'm an optimist, but also I don't see it going in a negative direction. I think we should be trending upwards. No one can dictate. Everybody wants it to be fast, right? Everybody wants it to just, okay, now we're going to go back to the top. It's just not likely to happen like that. It'll be gradual, I believe. Now, being in an election year, that's going to have some impact. To what extent? I have no idea. I don't have a clue. But an interesting statistic that I think will maybe kind of put things into perspective from a capacity standpoint, something like greater than 90% of trucking companies have less than 10 trucks. So you think about that, like greater than 90% of the trucking companies in the United States operate less than 10 trucks. So that's a lot of small businesses that are helping move things around the country. And that's with inflation, the driver wage, the cost of maintenance, lease deals that were extraordinarily high when things were booming. All of these costs plus fuel, started stacking upon each other. And the correction put a lot of those companies out of business, right? Those are all small businesses. 10 trucks, that's a small business. So I think that the correction has occurred, but the rehab is going to be a slow, gradual climb back to something approaching, what is it? Is it new normal? What did we used to call it? The new normal. Back to our new normal, whatever it is. So I don't know if that answers your questions. I think it's white noise to listen to a lot of the predictive analysis, at least niched in the transportation industry, because I just question the amount of data that they have. And I could be wrong on that. Maybe they'll show me the data and I'll believe it.
Yeah. That's an interesting take. No, that's good. I mean, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but we hear it all. Everybody wants to be the first to have the right answer. And I think, what I've seen some of the best companies do is just, you tighten your belt, make sure that you're executing and being very strategic in everything that you're doing. And that's, technology is playing a big role, especially now with like the boom of AI. I also want to call out, Amazon. My mom has continued her Amazon buying. So it's always nice.
Thank you to your mom, Doug.
She's an ally. Yeah.
That's
Prime
right.
Day, July 16th, for anybody that wants to,
That's
advantage.
Nice plug. Nice plug,
Yeah.
Doug. Good job.
No, that's awesome, Taylor. And I know we're about to close up here, but I wanted to get your take on one last thing. When it comes to the future and with what technology is happening and like the AI boom and Chat GPT, like what is the one thing that you're most excited about with some of these newer technologies coming out and like just the capability that you have with software?
I would love to see, I'd be really excited to see AI and some of the, advanced computing power, blockchain, some of these things that have only come on in the last 5 years or so, this advanced computing, just these supercomputers and blockchain technology. I would love to see some of these technologies help stamp out some of the fraud that continues to just damper the industry. Like it's just a gray cloud that has always been on the industry, but in the past 2-3 years, the prevalence is just crazy. I can't even remember. I don't know what the valuation is on being a bad actor. Like the industry as fraud, if you want to be a fraudster in the spot market transportation, I mean, it's well over $1 billion industry, in and of itself. And I would just love to see some of these technologies have these people target a different industry, because it seems like no matter what you do, I mean, you've seen, highway come in and make some improvement on carrier vetting compliance. And I think they do some identity validation. I'm not sure if they do or not, but it seems like no matter what Band-Aid solutions we continue to throw at these people, they continue to get through so that they can double broker the freight. They can sometimes steal the cargo. We've had that happen. I just really would love to see somebody take those guys down, right? Like, and there's tons of other ways that are exciting. There'd be a lot of other things that would be interesting to see AI enhance. I'm not a tinfoil hat person, and I've been doing this long enough that like the thought of AI replacing some people, I'm like, man, I wish there were some days AI would have replaced me because I was trying. I really wish it would have. So, you know, I don't think that's a big fright. I think it's here to help us enhance some things in the industry. But there's always going to be some comfort that a shipping manager or a transportation manager is going to get from being able to speak to me or yell at me, right? It's hard to yell at AI. You can yell at me. I've made a lot of money getting yelled at. All right.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'd say the fraud issue is something that I'd be most intrigued in having AI and some blockchain fix or improve.
Yeah. Yeah, fraud's definitely pretty rampant in the industry, and yeah, it's a good call. Highway's doing great things. Luke over at Highway's a great guy. But yeah, Taylor, thank you so much. You know, I know we can talk for hours, and we might just have to have you again on another episode. But thank you so much for really taking off with us and starting our podcast. So that'll do it for today's episode of No
Thanks
More
so much.
And thanks again.
All right. Have a good one, Doug.